afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The World Today, where we bring you the latest updates from around the world. I'm Rehan Morsi, and I'm joined this afternoon by Mr. Wahba, a journalist. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Let's start with our first news item from the Egypt Independent that reads, President Sisi receives Slovenian counterpart in Cairo. The news item itself reads, President Abdel Fattah Sisi receives his Slovenian counterpart, President Murat Pahur, in Cairo. Pahur begins an official two-day visit to Egypt as the first Slovenian president to visit the country. The two leaders hold a press conference following the meeting at the presidential palace. Slovenian ambassador in Cairo, Tatiana Meskova, said that President Pahur is set to meet with the Prime Minister and Parliament Speaker during his visit. Obviously, they did hold the press conference after the presidential palace meeting. How do you see the significance of this visit, and is it a key to Europe?
Yeah, of course, as you know, that Egypt has a great relations with all the European countries. Yes. And at the same time, as you mentioned, it is the first visit for a Slovenian president to Egypt since, as you know, that the independence or the referendum of Slovenia, yes, as an independent country in the European Union and so on. And at the same time, as you know, that Egypt is trying, on the other hand, to increase its bilateral relations with all the European countries. And I think as 26 years from the independence of Slovenia, yes, I think Cairo will launch many celebrations in political sides and also cultural affairs and so on to celebrate the 26th anniversary of the independence of Slovenia. Yes. And as you know that the Slovenian president is targeting to increase at the same time of his country's relations with the Egyptian organizations. As you know that he will visit the parliament and will meet with the Egyptian businessman. Yes. And I think the Egyptian Slovenian Business Council will resume its meeting again to discuss how to increase the trade, the economic relations with Slovenia.
What kind of economic trade can we expect?
As you know that Slovenia is an important country, especially in some industries of agri-tools, and at the same time in transportations. Yes. I think Egypt can get the technology and of the know-how from Slovenia, as we are trying at the same time to modernize some utilities in Egypt, especially railway stations, railways, yes, in Egypt, and also transportation sector in Egypt at the same time.
Do you think that Slovenia is going to be a key gateway into the European market?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Although it is maybe a small country, but it yes, is an important country. If you signed some bilateral agreement, mm-hmm, in trade, in export and import, if you took some procedures as exempting the export or the trade exchange from taxes and the custom duties and so on.
Okay, let's move to the next item that we have from the Daily News of Egypt that reads, President Sisi heads second meeting of Higher Council of Investment. The news item itself reads, President Abdel Fattah Sisi chaired the second meeting of the Higher Council of Investment. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Ala Yusuf said the meeting tackled a number of topics, topping them by the new investment draft bill that will be presented for social discussions with the investment union. The meeting also received suggestions of developing ports at the Suez Canal zone, as well as allocating and facilitating the procedures of all projects that are being implemented in the Sinai Peninsula. How do you see this? And Why is it important now?
Yeah. As you know that it is the second meeting in a short time for the High Council of Investment in Egypt, and as you know that in first meeting, I think President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi issued some decrees concerning how to facilitate investment in Upper Egypt, how to improve and to attract the foreign direct investment in Egypt at the same time, and also granted the businessmen in Egypt, the Arab businessmen and the foreign investors with some incentives if they wanted to invest in the Upper Egypt provinces and so on. This is, of course, the priority of the administrations of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, of the cabinet itself, to increase the foreign direct investment, not only in the traditional provinces, in Greater Cairo, for example, and so on, but also to push it and to pave the way for the foreign direct investment to investment in Upper Egypt provinces. This is on one hand. On the other hand, as you know, that Egypt at the same time created a new investment law. And I think the cabinet, as the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed it with the minister in charge, I think the cabinet maybe in half of the current month will approve it and will refer it to the parliament at the same time. This is, of course, to meet or to answer the great questions, how to attract the foreign direct investment in Egypt, especially after 2011, we suffered from the decreases of the foreign direct investment.
But one of the problems that, or actually one of the issues that the presidency and the government has spoken about is the fact that they want to encourage local investors and Egyptians basically to work within industry and export rather than import items. What will the government do in order to increase
of course. Let us say first that in the new draft of the investment law, I think they unified the treatment for all investors, even Egyptian, Arab, or the foreign investor. This is a great point. Not to make discriminations as in the last or the past decades between the investors. This was the problem of Egypt.
But if they want to increase, if they want to increase local investors and encourage them, shouldn't they give them more benefits than foreigners?
They give them. I think the draft proposed many incentives for the investors. You may speak about the items, I think, issued since 2 days or 3 days by President when they raised the tariffs for some imported goods. I think it is a luxury goods in Egypt. We didn't need it, and you have the samples or the Egyptian products. You can use it.
Yes. Let's move to the next item that we have from the New York Times that reads, Libya pro-government forces have total control of Sirte from Daesh militants. The news item itself reads, Libyan loyalist forces have seized full control of the coastal city of Sirte from Daesh militant group. An official spokesman, pro-government forces, said that the forces had total control of Sirte after more than 6 months of fighting. What is the consequences of the move, that kind of move on the security situation in Libya?
It means a chance for the Libyan for the Libyan people to get benefit from their utilities, especially in the coast of the Mediterranean.
Yes.
As you know that Sirte and some other coastal cities, Daesh tried to siege and control it, especially and at the same time to control the oil refineries and so on. I think it is a great success for the pro-government forces to dismiss and to control now the city of Sirte.
Yes.
This, on one hand, as you know that there is some pressures on Daesh in the other countries. They are trying to get a foothold on the other countries like Libya, like the African countries and so on.
But the international community, for instance, the international community's focus and the media is also always focused on Syria, but not so much on Libya. Why is this the case?
Because, I think because some superpowers provided the pro-government forces in Libya with a logistic aid.
Yes. This purpose just now, but
it's just as divided in Libya. It's just as divided as Syria. Almost the same situation.
The same situations, but as you know, in Syria, it is an open war between the superpowers.
Yes.
But now they are trying to keep their goals and their aims in Libya and their benefits at the same time. As you know that maybe the oil, the international oil market may be influenced by what happened in Libya in some times.
Okay, let's move to the next item that we have from the Daily Star of Lebanon that reads, Airstrike kills 14 in Syria's Idlib, according to the Monitor. The news item itself reads, airstrikes on the village in the Syrian province of Idlib killed at least 14 civilians on Sunday, among them a child. The Britain-based group said dozens more had been injured in the strikes on several parts of the village of Kafnabel, and that the death toll could rise. It said the strikes appeared to have been carried out by a Russian warplane. The observatory says it determines whose planes carried out raids according to their type, location, flight patterns, and munitions involved. How do you see this situation? I mean, obviously there's a humanitarian crisis and a lot of civilian casualties in Syria. Why are the airstrikes continuing even though both parties know very well that it's going to affect innocent civilians?
Let us say that the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov declared that the American presented an initiatives for the United Nations to let the rebels to go out of Aleppo, and at the same time, as you know, that the Russian accepted these initiatives. But I think that the Russian declared today if they didn't get, if they don't want to go, I mean the rebels from Aleppo, they will treat them as a terrorist, and they will target them in the coming airstrikes.
But there are civilians within the rebel factions.
Yeah, but they opened the way for the civilian. But as you know that some militia and terrorists and also fundamentalists in Syria took the civilian
as hostages.
They are trying to protect themselves. But I think there is, maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow, they will resume negotiations again in Geneva between the United States and Russia, and under the umbrella of the United Nations. I think they can reach a deal.
Bashar al-Assad's forces are well into Aleppo and are almost completely in control of Aleppo. If they manage to control Aleppo completely, what does this mean for the situation there?
It means that I think the balance or the equilibrium of the situations in Syria may be changed, because if you accept negotiations in a weak positions, I think you will not reach to
a good compromise.
A good compromise. But after the success of the official forces in Syria,
Yes.
I think they can play an important role in negotiations, especially the Syrian regime captured many cities in the last weeks.
Okay, let's move on to the next item that we have from The Guardian that reads, Iraq's government ferrying relief supplies to Mosul. The news item itself reads, the Iraqi government on Sunday sent truckloads of food, heating oil and drinking water to residents of areas retaken from Daesh group in and around the northern city of Mosul as more civilians streamed out of the city amid intense fighting between the militants and troops. The top relief official at the Ministry of Immigration and Displaced said that the supplies were being delivered to the towns of Bartella and Qayara, east and south of Mosul respectively, as well as the outlying Mosul neighborhoods. The government launched a campaign to retake Mosul from Daesh in October, and the fighting has caused shortages of vital supplies like clean drinking water. It seems that the Iraqi army or the Iraqi forces are starting to gradually control Iraq again.
Yeah, of course, as you know, they achieved some success in the last month. As you know, that the Iraqi forces is still fighting in Mosul, and the Daesh groups are moving from a city to another cities and so on.
But they're encircling them somehow.
Yeah, they encircling them just now. But I think that they need also at the same time the logistic aids from the international coalitions, especially they are still fearing interfering as they will maybe or cause a damage in the between the civilian in the city. I think as the American journal said, they don't expect that the battle in Mosul will end in days or weeks. It may take months.
Do you think that if the Iraqi army, as well as the Shiite militia, are able to control the situation in Iraq, this will weaken the extremist forces in Syria as well?
Yeah, of course, because as you know, the border between Syria and Iraq is fully opened between the rebels or the Daesh in Syria and also in Iraq. They changed the information, they changed the logistic aids and so on. And if some pressures happened in Iraq, for example, they fled to Syria. If they faced the same pressures, they fled again to Iraq.
Okay, let's take our final news item from the Washington Post that reads, Yemen forces prepare assault on rebels near Key Strait. The news item itself reads, Yemeni government forces sent reinforcements to the Red Sea coast to drive Iran-backed rebels away from the key global shipping route. Shia Houthi insurgents and their ally forces loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh control most of the country's Red Sea coastline. That includes Wahba, about just 30 kilometers from the strategic and busy Bab el-Mandab Strait, linking the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. How do you see this? Obviously, this is a major problem for the Gulf region. And
yeah, of course.
If the government is unable to control the strait, what does this mean for the international community?
I think it will be a threat for the international community, a threat for the international
trade.
In the area. And as you know, at the same time, Iran now is practicing some pressures upon the Gulf countries, especially after the American administration renewed sanctions again against Iran. Yes. They are trying to reach or to get some benefits from the international situations in Yemen, in some areas around the Yemen itself. This, of course, to practice pressures upon the international community at the same time.
Well, unfortunately, sir, you ran out of time. So, Mr. Wahba, a journalist, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of this episode of The World Today, but stay tuned for more updates on Nile TV.